Welcome to Loot Shooter Weekly. This week we are back with tonight a Borderlands 3 build video. So this is really a build video. I am gamertag Burt Reynolds, one of the hosts, and my awesome co-host tonight is the golden voice of gaming, the one and only Negan Killjoy, ladies and gentlemen.
That's right. Hey Burt, how you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing well, Negan. How about you?
You're
looking
all right.
Rather buff in that outfit. That is, get a little star up there.
It was sunny over the weekend, so you got that whole sun's out, guns out theory. So that's what Zane's doing this time. He's showing off his muscular bod for the nice weather we had over the weekend.
Nice. Yeah, you live in a much better place than I do.
Yes, I'm guessing you probably weren't guns out this weekend for you.
The sun came out for a couple hours one day, and it got up to 25, so nice. That was pretty awesome.
Ooh, smoking hot. Probably sweating a little bit after that kind of heat.
Yeah. Which is, part of why I titled the build. I put together a build for Amara that we're going to go over tonight, and I titled her the Winter Witch, because she's all focused around cryo, but, in that winter spirit right now because it is so cold here, and so
absolutely
we're gonna go over that build in a little bit. Yeah, right now it's probably like 16 out, I would imagine. We will get you the official here. Oh no, it's 24.
24. Holy crap!
Wow. Yeah. Chicago gets cold this time of year, man. It really does. And you in California, you don't know what that's like. That's cool.
Oh, I'm wearing a sweatshirt. It's 54 and I'm wearing a sweatshirt, so there's that.
No salt from my side of things. I'm not jealous.
That's right. As we get so used to the warmth out here, it's like, oh my gosh, it gets below 70, people put it on parkas and shit.
Yeah, we've discussed this before, at least maybe not on stream, but we've discussed it before. When it gets up to 50 here after winter, people put the tops down on their cars, wear shorts and t-shirts.
That's right, you guys are going convertibles, exactly.
Yeah. So, kind of the opposite thing here, but whatever, Anyway, it's Thursday and almost the weekend. We actually have a lot to cover tonight, but before we do jump into covering this, we'll do our other segment tonight. Talk about
fast.
Well, we got a lot to cover, man. I'm going to get moving because I've done a lot of work on this build, a lot of testing. I want to talk about some of the stuff I kind of figured out this week, and we got some buffs in this game. 4 more guns I think got buffed today. I've got one of them with me tonight, so I'll show you that. I didn't grab all. I'm sure I have all 4 of the ones that got buffed, but I'm not using them on this build. So we'll talk about beers. Let's talk about beers. It's my week to go first, so I'm going first.
You go first. You go.
Gonna go first.
Your bad stuff.
Now, my wife actually has had COVID, so we've been on hard lockdown. So I have not had a chance to go get anything special. And I'm sure I've done this one before at some point, but it's probably been quite a while. But I am doing Cold Snap from Sam Adams, which is their white ale with spices. And I think they put it out every winter. No fancy description, pretty label. Yeah, I mean, it's a little different take of a winter beer, I suppose, than, normally I'm a stout guy. We both did stouts last time. Mm-hmm. This is not a stout. I did get a glass, Negan.
All right, good.
Being civilized tonight.
Civilized,
I'm
exactly.
Pour it into a glass. What are you drinking?
Tonight, I am drinking from Morgan Territory Brewing, which is out of Tracy, California. It's kind of near me, not terribly close, but kind of near me. It's a beer called Lubricator. I figured you would enjoy it because I'll send you a picture of it, but it has a picture of an oil can on front of it, and it says it's a Doppelbock. It says apply freely until noises stop. I kind of figured the whole car mentality.
Motor oil
until all the noise go away. It actually has a pretty descriptive, like a paragraph on the back. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically it talks about how It's a malt-driven doppelback. It's high-octane powerhouse of multiple Munich malts. Its toast is perfectly balanced by the sweet toffee flavors. This is a higher alcohol lager. It's an 8% alcohol. So it is a higher alcohol lager.
So you're going to be a party tonight, then.
I'm going to be a party tonight. Whoop, whoop. And it talks about how it, brewed at cooler temperatures for smoothness and offers a complex sipping experience. And it's medium body with low medium carbonation. And it won a California State Fair gold medal in 2019. So there we go. So it's called Lubricated by Morgan Territory. Got the old school oil can on there, little squirt can that people used back in the day, or maybe still use. Maybe on some of the classic cars you've worked on, or that you have. You have a classic car, right?
I do. 62 Mercury Monterey. And yes, I do have some vintage oil cans like that. I think you're talking about the kind that you kind of push the back of it and it...
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of
I do have one of those. that type of stuff does still exist when you live in the Midwest.
And you apply freely until noise is stopping your old car, right?
Yeah. Very much so. Yeah, that is exactly how that goes. Before I got the transmission rebuilt 2 years ago, the car lubricated itself very well. Not intentionally, but the underside of it is always well lubricated.
The underside, the sidewalk, the driveway, everything is well lubricated.
Old cars like to mark their territory. I think, there's something to be said for that. Something to be said for that.
That is one way to look at it.
Not nearly as bad as old motorcycles, man. I also have a thing for old motorcycles, and boy, do those mark their territory. So, yeah.
Yeah, once they start, they never stop.
They don't. No. So cheers to you, Negan.
Cheers, my friend.
So we're gonna do a rundown of the build here, and then we're gonna take it and we're gonna show it to you. I want to say I am genuinely very excited to show you this build, and I'm gonna show it to you. And before you think too far into this, it is a Ties That Bind build, and I know those are old and they've been done with Amara. This is a Ties That Bind. It's a Ties That Bind build. You could run it with phase cast. So if you're more into phase cast, you can run it with phase cast or phase grasp, either one. And it's not, at initial blush, it's not terribly different than the CC Hero Amara in terms of the fact that we're using the same shield and Ties That Bind to set the shield off. But kind of my thought process or vision for this was to put a build together. One, I wanted to use the purple tree the newer purple tree. Two, I wanted to create a build that was, maybe I'm the only person like this, but I really love Aurelia Hammerlock, who of course is one of the main enemies in this game. And I thought she drops a lot of really cool gear, including the shield, the Cold Heart or Frozen Heart, which is the shield we're using. But I thought, what if we put a build together that made you feel like you were being Aurelia Hammerlock? And that's what I attempted to do. And I feel like I've really succeeded. So you get all the power fantasy of being Aurelia Hammerlock with this. I'm going to go in, I'm going to show you the skill trees first, and then we'll talk about the gear in a second. And then we'll go play with it a little bit, and I'll show you a couple different options and kind of some of the things that I teased out when I was testing when putting this together. So I'm going to actually start with the blue skill tree here, and we put 5 in to do harm. This grants Amara stacks of rush. Activating her action skill consumes the rush stacks. This is rush stacks do action skill damage. This is very strong with Ties That Bind. It's basically a requirement. It's also very strong with phase cast. Any action skill that does damage, this just buffs that. We have a little bit of Violent Tapestry, just a couple points into it.
Just real fast, before you get too far into this, explain the difference between what happens with Ties That Bind and phase grasp. Why?
Phase cast?
Yeah, phase cast.
Because Ties That Bind is a type of phase grasp. So you basically either have grasp, or you have cast, or you have phase slam, and now you have the orb in the purple tree. Phase grasp, you literally pick people up off the ground.
Right.
Phase cast, you shoot out an oral projection of Amara, and that damages them. But you can also have it if you use, for example, stillness of mind. You do this like projection. She does this little thing where she goes whoosh, like that, and basically like what looks like a ghost of you goes flying forward. If you do put stillness of mind on, it will lift a few guys up for a second until they take damage and then they fall. So,
Okay.
you know, the difference here is that, like, when you go to do bossing, usually I will switch to phase cast and switch to all phase cast 250 weapons. Phase grasping, and you've seen this, Negan. I mean, I pick up a guy and all these ties go out to other other enemies around them, and it passes damage through the ties. It's very, very strong for mobbing.
Okay. Makes sense.
And that's, you know, it's really single point versus multi-point is what it basically comes down to. So yeah, 5 we did into do harm. 2 we're going to put in a violent tapestry. This just ups our status effect chance. Again, Amara does a lot of status effects. In this case, we're really going to be focused on cryo, the cryo status effect. I put 4 into alacrity. This gives you reload speed for stacks. Transcend. This gives us bonus critical hit damage and accuracy. So makes our guns a little bit more accurate. Ascendant, this just basically all action skill augments gain increased effectiveness. So you can see here, you know, in this particular case, we're going to do Lifesteal from Soul Sap, and it's going to give us a bonus 20%, which gives us, you know, extra 50%, and expedites our action skill cooldowns a little bit. Now this is an interesting one, and I'll explain it a little bit when we get to the gear. But I did do 3 into From Rest, and this gives increased fire rate, but most importantly, charge time. And we're going to see that, you know, this Amara has a very strong Malawan allegiance. So basically, all the guns are Malawan except for 1. And you know, at times I am running with all Malawan weapons.
Get away from your doll attitude. You okay with that?
I am. I'm all right.
You talk to your therapist about this? You work through this issue with dealing with Malawan guns like this?
I'm trying. I'm trying something different, Negan. I'm trying something different.
Okay, all right.
Laid Bare. This is basically going to pass additional damage through those ties that bind. Wrath gives us gun damage. Remnant, this build is very focused on splash damage, and Remnant is basically all the over damage that you do to an enemy. It will create an orb that flies and hits another enemy with all the extra over damage, and it's dealt in splash damage. And since we're so focused on splash damage, obviously we're going to put the points into the Remnant. And finally, Avatar, which lets us activate our action skill twice.
Why didn't you sink more into over the last one, the last skill? You only had 1 of 3. Why didn't you put more into there?
Remnant, it's not really needed. Oftentimes this over damage is so high that it'll hit for off the charts amounts of damage. So it's not, you know, putting more into it just gives you additional off the chart damage, and it doesn't change. So the one thing about it, I mean, if you think about how this theoretically could work versus how it actually works, so let's say I do 10 million damage to an enemy, and they have a health bar of 2 million. So I have 8 million extra damage. So a Remnant Orb flies out with 8 million damage and hits another guy with 2 million hit points. It should, you know, in theory, if it chained, it would then cast out a Remnant Orb of 6 million damage and so on and so forth, right? But it only activates once, and once it's killed someone, it doesn't happen again until you overkill another enemy. Does that make sense? So you never have more than 1 Remnant Orb at once going, and it doesn't chain from enemy to enemy to enemy. If it did, then I would argue you would want to put as much into this as you possibly could, right? Because theoretically, 1 Remnant Orb could just go around and kill an entire room of guys.
Right.
Not how it works, so we don't do it.
Okay. Makes sense.
Avatar is a must-have. You know, the capstone here, it allows us to activate our action skill more than once. Per, like, basically on cooldown, you get to activate again. And it's going to be important when we get to the shield, in terms of, you know, activating the on-action skill activate skill that we're using on the shield. Now, we're going to look a little later at different class mods. I have a couple different class mods for this that I can run. In this particular case, we're always going to have 5 into anima, but in this case, I'm going to end up with 10 into it, and it's basically status effects deal increased damage over time and have an increased duration. This is good, if you're using consecutive hits weapons, because those little ticks of elemental damage count as consecutive hits. It's just also very strong, and you can see here the status effect damage is up by 40%. The duration is twice as long. And the action skill status effect damage. So my action skill applies status effect damage as well. It's attuned to an element. You can see on the right over there that it's attuned to ice. That's going to get an 80% buff. So very strong. Steady hands, I put 1 here. This just has to do with weapon handling and accuracy. I did put 3 into infusion. Normally a lot of people just put 1. This is going to allow us to convert weapons that don't have any element to have, in this case, 24% elemental damage added onto them. And the elemental damage is going to be that ice from my action skill. Or if I use a gun that doesn't have any cryo in it, it will add 24% cryo to it. So basically allows me to use guns like the Ogre that have no inherent element and make them elemental. I always put 1 into Wildfire.
Sounds like that's going to come in handy at some point tonight.
It does. It will come in handy, especially when we're looking at some of the guns we're going to play around with. I always put 1 into Wildfire. It gives it a slight chance to spread to other enemies, but if you're killing a lot of enemies, it spreads. 1 point's more than enough. Tempest is going to allow us to, again, deal additional elemental damage, and if we had shock damage on, it'd be further increased. It makes choosing shock weapons an excellent choice a lot of the time, because you get a 20% buff to the shock damage from the shock weapons. We do have Dread. This gives us a little boost in gun damage whenever we've grasped somebody, which we're going to do a lot of. I did put 3 into Indiscriminate. This allows things to ricochet. You'll see why when we get to one of the guns that we're using. This is a very strong skill when used with the, what is the gun called? Complex Root. Deep Well for additional mag size. I did put 5 into Sustainment. A lot of people probably would argue with me because this, again, is just upping the lifesteal. A lot of people feel that just 1 or 2 points here is plenty. I went with 5 because we're using the Frozen Heart. We oftentimes are going to be getting very close to enemies, and a lot of extra lifesteal is what's really going to keep us alive. Anything less than this, I found that I was going down far too often, just because we're going to play in very close proximity. Finally, Forceful Expression here. This, again, I feel like it's a must-have because it just deals bonus elemental damage based on, in this case, cryo. 18% bonus damage. It's a lot. I put 3 points into Personal Space because we are going to get close. I could have put more points in the Purple Tree. This is a very strong skill, though. I mean, one of the stronger damage-dealing skills in all of Amara's skill trees, and since we are literally going to get right up in the faces of our enemies, it felt bad not to put the 3 points into Personal Space.
Yeah, it would be hard to turn down an additional 54% of damage.
Yeah, it's a lot of damage. It's a lot of damage. It just really is. It'd be like not going into Short Fuse at the bottom of Moses' skill tree. It's like, that's a lot of damage. It's really kind of a deal breaker. And it's at the top of this tree, so it's not even hard to pick it up. And finally, we're going to go into the Purple Tree here. And as I said earlier, we're going to have a lot of focus on splash damage, a lot of focus on Malawan weapons. So we're going to go 5 into Heavy Rain, which gives us projectile speed, which is, of course, is important on things like Malawan guns that basically shoot elemental orbs out at a somewhat slow pace, or projectile speed, so it's going to really buff that up. We get a 35% buff to splash damage, and then these 2 skills are amazing. And you could divide the points up here any way you want. You can put them all into one, or all into the other, or 2 into this, and 1 into this, but I chose it this way after some testing and found this, in my opinion, to be the most effective. Whenever Amara freezes an enemy, she gains increased movement speed and weapon damage for a short time. 6% movement speed, that's not a lot, but 14% gun damage for 16 seconds. The reason I didn't put more points into this one and go to the next one is only takes it up to 21, which isn't huge. Then in this one, Unweave the Rainbow, Amara deals bonus damage of her attuned element, so in this case, cryo, whenever she deals melee damage or splash damage to frozen enemies. We're going to have a lot of frozen enemies, and we're going to be using only splash damage weapons. 11% of damage dealt. So again, both of these are equally very, very strong and wise choices. Questions on the skill tree, Negan?
Nope. So when you're running this, what do you expect to happen as you're running this? What is going to be happening with the mobs and stuff like that? There's going to be a lot of up in clouds, up in the ties that binds, and freezing all over the place. A lot of ice cubes, or what do you expect to happen?
A lot of ice cubes. A lot of ice cubes. And you and I ran a Guardian takedown together the other night when I was testing this. Not the final version, but everything turns to ice, basically. Mm-hmm. And that's the goal. I mean, everything's going to turn to ice.
And not just something that's in ties that bind mode. It's also the stuff that you're shooting and splash damage and stuff like that. So there's a lot of stuff going icy on us.
Everything turns icy. Everything everywhere turns icy. And I'm actually going to quickly run to my bank and grab a gun because I forgot to put it on, and I want to talk about it as well because I actually just managed to get one of these today from a giveaway. And while I'm grabbing this, I do want to say thank you first and foremost to our great Discord, Angelic and Beastly Creatures, and specifically to Tribalmer, who hooked me up with some of the gear for this week because I wanted to do a lot of testing, and when you do a lot of testing, you need a lot of gear. So he hooked me up with several of the pieces for me to do a little testing. Not all of those are being run tonight, but I would also like to point out that the vast majority of the guns here that we're going to look at, I did farm. They're farmed guns, and so I literally I farmed earlier this week. Farmed this about maybe a month ago, and this is farmed as well, this complex route. So none of this gear is something you can't get, and in particular, since we're going for that Aurelia Hammerlock theme, a lot of the gear we're going to look at tonight you can get from one boss, just farming the same boss, including the grenade, the shield, and the assault rifle. I chose the beacon, Malawan. I chose to go with a 1x of this, not a 2x, because ammo consumption's a problem for Amara. And the beacon is a great choice here. This gun, especially with all the buffs that you saw from the skill tree to projectile speed and charge time and everything else, all the downsides of this gun are totally mitigated by that. And this thing just shreds. And you can see here from an element standpoint, usually when I'm running this, I'm running it with radiation on. This is a gun that got buffed last week.
Even the Guardian takedown, you run it with radiation?
I did. No, I did not run it with... And we'll look at why I didn't put corrosive on. Because I have it as the ASC on my grenade. So I didn't want to double up on it. I wanted to spread out the elements a little bit. But, I mean, you could run whatever. If I had other elements, again, I farmed this week, right? So it was like, I got it. I was like, yeah, I'm going to give that. We're going to run the DNA, binary mocking DNA. And this gun got buffed last week. This puts out spreads of every element. It's a very fun gun. Got a very strong buff. It is a close competitor, I would argue, for the plasma coil. This comes from Aurelia Hammerlock. This is the double penetrating Juliet's Dazzle. This is the only gun in our arsenal tonight that does not come from Malawan. Malawan does not make assault rifles. They don't. So, I mean, you don't have to run an assault rifle, right? I don't have to. In parts of the takedown the other night, I did not. But in general, I usually run pistol, SMG, assault rifle, and some form of heavy, either shotgun launcher or sniper rifle. I think it comes from too many years of playing Destiny, and that's the only way it feels right. But you could run, several different shotguns, and so the Trevenator would be an excellent choice here, or the gun I just went and got from the bank, the Unescapable, the Insider, would also be an excellent choice. So either one of those would be fantastic here. You could run the Red Line as far as torque shotguns go. But, we're going to run the Juliet's Dazzle to start with. Finally, this gun is amazing, the Complex Root, which is also from Malawan. This gun can be very dangerous, and, oftentimes I don't recommend it. But in this case, we can run it as long as we only run it on cryo. If we switch over to radiation, or if we go back to our skill tree, and if we had points into conflux, or if your comm has conflux, you cannot run the route. You can't. Because the other elemental damage that conflux adds in, or running that gun on anything other than cryo, will kill you. It'll bounce back. There's a bounce back mechanism here on the route. That's its downside. Like its kind of trait is it does a bunch of damage going out, but it also damages you. The damage coming back in is enough to kill you if you have it on anything other than cryo. And the reason cryo is okay here is the sort of a secret trait of the Frozen Heart is it has a lot of ice resistance. You can see it has 13% on there, but it has bonus resistances to cryo in it.
Talk about real fast on the guns themselves. The anointments that you were going for was splash damage anointment?
It's interesting. So this is where I did a ton of testing this week, Negan. Some of these you'll see have consecutive hits. And it's not that I don't have it with splash damage. It's just each kind of gun has an amount of splash damage it does. You'll notice this one in the card says nothing about splash damage. It does splash damage, and it can roll with splash damage anointments on it, but it does not do a lot of splash damage. You'll see this, though, it says 72% splash damage radius, and it does a lot of splash damage. So does this. And so does, well, this one doesn't say it, but this does a lot of splash damage. Guns like the Hornet do a lot of splash damage. But guns like, well, the Bloodstar Beasts do, these do, the Rebounds do, but guns like, for example, the Chaos, which I love, the Chaos doesn't do a lot of splash damage. It only does splash damage when something explodes from it. That makes sense? And so,
Yep.
In the case where something doesn't do a lot of consistent splash damage, it's better to run consecutive hits. And when I say better, I mean a little bit. Like, it's not a ton better, but I did testing in the range, and I did testing in play, and on each one of these guns, choosing what I chose was the choice I made because it is slightly better to run that. Like, this is another one, the Clairvoyance. It can roll with splash damage on it. I have some with splash damage. It does not do enough splash damage to be worth doing the 200% splash damage. But the Bearcat, which got a buff today, that does a ton. The Ogre does a ton. Insider does a ton. Trevinator does a ton, But like the Hellwalker, not enough. The Globetrotter, splash damage. These guys I have consecutive hits on and splash, so it depends on the one I'm running. The Compressing Storm, which is fun to run on this, that, again, plenty of splash damage. But if you had consecutive hits, you're fine. It's not that gear specific.
Okay, that's what I was going to be my next question. How specific is that? But so you have some flexibility.
You have a little flexibility. Frozen Heart Shield, basically what this is going to do is going to put out a Cryo Nova anytime it breaks. Well, I have on action skill start, I can activate any effect that triggers on shield fill or break. So we can trigger the shield to break anytime we grasp an enemy. This grenade, and this drops from Aurelia Hammerlock as well. So this, and now this are all rewards from Aurelia Hammerlock. This is the Whispering Ice Grenade. You can also get this one downstairs in the purple vending machine downstairs. It's Crazy Earl's vending machine. If you completed the mission where you fight Aurelia, this was the reward for that mission. So if you go check that vending machine regularly, you can find this grenade there. And it comes up, at least in mine, it comes up rather often. The Whispering Ice Grenade, it basically kind of does, if you remember the Aurelia fight where she shoots up the pillars of ice, this grenade basically does that. We have an Icebreaker Victory Rush here. I tried doing, you may remember, Negan, we did that video with Moe's where I had the spark plug deathless, and I would jump around and turn everything into ice cubes. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
So I tried that with a spark plug victory rush. It doesn't work here. I thought maybe it would. I thought maybe if I planted the spark plugs and then triggered the shield, it would do the same thing where it just shot out ice everywhere. It does not. Sad to report, no luck there. Yeah, I know. So I'm running an Icebreaker Victory Rush. Basically, this is going to give me bonus damage against frozen targets and a lot of cryo efficiency. Cryo efficiency is the ability to freeze enemies. I have cryo damage, action skill cooldown rate, and AoE. AoE is just code for additional splash damage. And finally, my comm. I have a Phazerker. It has 5 into Anima. Again, I want nothing into Conflux if I'm going to use the root. I have splash damage, weapon damage, and action skill cooldown rate because we want that action skill to come back very quickly. Any questions on what I did with the gear, Negan? You asked a great question about the consecutive hits versus splash, and that is an excellent question.
You had mentioned earlier when we were think we were doing the takedown or something like that about the way the DNA splash damage works. It's when the bullets cross over each other, or there's some mechanic there that happens. Just talk about that real fast.
Yeah, so basically the DNA shoots out rounds, and they go out and they kind of look like DNA molecules, like, what are those called? The chains.
Protein chains.
Protein chains, yeah. And they crisscross each other, like a DNA strand. And only at the point where they're crossing, if they hit when they're crossing, does it deal splash damage. So it deals splash damage, but not always, right? You know what I mean? And it's the same again with the chaos. The chaos deals splash damage when an enemy dies. They explode in big splash damage, but not the bullets. They don't do splash damage. You know, so it's like there are a bunch of guns in the game that are like that, where they deal splash damage, but not all the time. And that's one of those guns that does not deal it all the time. So consecutive hits is a nice choice here. It's going to buff up our raw damage. And again, if you had a splash damage one, you're going to be fine. I ran that through most of the takedown the other night. If you have a consecutive hits one, you're going to be fine. And same goes on every other gun we're looking at here. You know, quick shout out, the plasma coil is also an excellent choice, although here again I use the consecutive hits one. Just because, again, the plasma coil does splash damage, but not a ton. So let's go play with this thing, and I'll do some gear switching out, and I'll show you some of the other choices, because those are not the only choices for good guns that you can run on this, and so I'll show you a couple other ones that I played around with and did testing with. And I'll show you a little bit of how that, some of the I'll just show you some of the interactions of some of the skills here, and we'll get a little picture of how that looks, because there's some pretty cool stuff. Again, with like converting the action skill element damage over into guns that are kinetic. Very, very cool stuff.
And unlike the recent builds that you put together, you played the other ones in medium, kind of at range. You said this one you're getting up close and personal. You're getting a little closer, a little more in their face type situation with this build.
The closer you are comfortable getting with this build, the more damage it does.
All right, so into face.
If you are comfortable, I mean, as always, right? You take a little bit more risk. And that's why I put all those points into lifesteal, because you are going to take a risk in getting very close. But the closer you get, the more effective every aspect of this build is going to be, literally.
Nice.
So I do need to grab some ammo. So I'll start out. I'm just going to show you how it works. The build works, and I'm going to show you in this first area. I'll try and use each one of the weapons a little bit. We're going to start out here with the beacon, and I'm gonna head left and hit a larger group of enemies instead of a smaller group of enemies.
I'm gonna hide over here in the corner like I always do.
So, you can boom. See, I didn't even, literally did not even shoot that guy. I just grabbed him. And he died.
And obviously you're taking advantage of the lifesteal that you talked about, because a second ago you were pretty low, where you keep getting the ties that bind, and that's where you're getting your lifesteal, is the ties that bind grab, right?
Yes, and dealing elemental damage. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different things that, help deal the ties, or help with getting some lifesteal. Like, anytime I'm dealing some elemental damage, I'm getting it.
Good.
So, as long as I'm continuing to deal elemental damage, like, it's funny because one of the things I can actually do is, like, throw a grenade to get lifesteal, as long as that grenade is elemental. Oop. Now I downed myself with the grenade there, so that's not good. And this guy's gonna run away from me, but I can get him.
Not far enough. Oh, only a
not far enough. So yeah, I mean, if you end up, that grenade can be a little dangerous. Could call it out. A nice alternative for that grenade, if you have one, is a cryo hex, which also has a lot of ability to freeze things. Nothing beats the Whispering Ice, though, from ability to freeze up enemies. Grenade.
You still using the beacon, or are you flipping guns now?
I am going to show you the DNA. So the ironic thing always about Ties That Bind builds is the enemies that actually take the most damage are the ones that are bound, not the ones that are grasped. So, if the guy I grab will take less damage than the guys that are in the ties. And you'll see, like, even as I shoot this guy, everything else in the ties is gonna basically explode and die.
That lifesteal is real for you, by the way. Watching that, your bar go back and forth, that is real.
Yeah. It is very real. Alright, so now I'm going to switch to Juliet's Dazzle, which again is the gun that comes from Aurelia. Look at how effective. Now I'm not going to use my ties for a second. I'm just going to show you how incredibly effective this gun is at freezing enemies in place. Like, I'm just going to turn. If I can get some. Yep, see? Frozen. So, an excellent choice for freezing up enemies. Very, very strong. And you can see the whole map is ice, right?
Right, and this is the gun that took advantage of the skill that was the ricochet bullets. Really well. It was built into the gun itself.
That's the root, the complex root. So what the root does, it's kind of like, and I'll show you that one in the next area. So the complex root, we're set on cryo. If I set it on radiation, I'll kill myself, like, without a doubt. The root sends out what looks like a swarm of bees. And it has a weird interaction between that ricochet skill. You saw that, right? The ricochet skill and AoE or splash damage. It's crazy. Now this guy is going to be the biggest challenge for me in here, because he is that was a frostbite heavy. He's resistant to cryo. That makes for a little bit of trouble for this build, which is again a good reason to run shock weapons, but you can't run a shock.
Trouble being a relative term is how fast you actually took him down, by the way. So let's be a little perspective here, my friend.
Well, I couldn't insta-delete him, Negan, so that, to me, that's trouble.
there you go. It took you 5 seconds as opposed to 2 seconds. Okay, I see your concerns. I got you. I got your concerns.
To me, that's trouble.
All right.
Yeah, so here again, now here I'm not going to get too close to that. That's the one time I'm not going to get too close. If I get too close, I will kill myself with this. This is the most dangerous of the guns I have in my arsenal, both in terms of ability to kill things, but also in terms of a need to stay back a little bit. Like, that one I don't want to get super close with. Don't need to. Very strong. You can see how, I mean, even my grasp is hitting for like 9 million. Just the grasp. Tell you what, those icicles never get old.
No, looks like you're having some fun with it. It's almost like that other game's new abilities.
What other game is that, Negan?
I don't know. I'm just saying there are other games that have similar abilities. And very similar to the ice crystals like that. Stasis.
Nothing we play though.
No,
I'm
not
just
at all.
kidding. It does remind me a little bit of Stasis, yes. So yeah, there's that. So let's take a look at some of the other guns we could be running real quick before we kind of close this out. And again, the Hornet, excellent choice. I'll show you what the plasma coil looks like. But Bloodstar Beast, Flipper, all good choices here. I'm going to run the consecutive hits one. In the assault rifle range, I did want to show you like the one I ran the other night in the takedown was the Rebound. The Rebound's very strong. I actually ran the 2X because the 3X burns too much ammo. But you could run the Contained Blast. You could run... What else? You could run the Rogue, Lovable Rogue. Obviously Boomsicle. You can run the Clairvoyance. This one got a buff today, the Bearcat, so I'm going to show you that. And then in the shotgun range, let's take a look at what the Trevinator can do. And then we'll show you what the Insider can do as well. Because again, with the Malawan guns, they got us like this build just makes the charge time so low on these things. So obviously the Hornet's a doll. I think my love of the Hornet is well known. My love of all things doll is well known.
Doll fanboy. Oh, I didn't say that out loud. Sorry, I was on mute. I meant to say it on mute.
You meant to stay on mute. Yeah, no, it's true. So that's the Hornet. Again, very splashy. The coil's just broken. The coil, honestly, you could probably run the plasma coil with a terrible anointment and it'd be, great. So that's the coil. The Bearcat. This bad boy got a buff today. I was shocked. But you can see this thing, and I chose cryo on this. I chose cryo. Just because look at these ice balls I'm throwing out here. I mean, I'm just literally trashing everything with ice. It's so good. And so there's that. And Trevinator, look at how fast I can rip these rounds out of this thing with those skills on. Oh, I don't, obviously, this guy's corrosive, don't want that. And I'm going to change up guns one more time here.
That was a real struggle. That badass right there is a real struggle for you. But
very much so.
I don't know if you noticed as you were doing it, but there was a group of guys that dropped down next to you as you were shooting the badass, and your icicles and stuff took him out pretty well. Took them out as you were doing it, so you didn't have to
without me even seeing it.
Yep. Yeah.
So I'm going to switch here, and I'll show you the red line real quick with this, and of course any launcher is going to work as well. But we'll go to the next area. The thing I wanted to show that's kind of neat here. So this is the Ogre, and the Ogre is not elemental at all. So no elements. But you'll see that I will actually, because I'm attuning part of my action skill over, this will do cryo damage. And I'm not gonna do my action skill, I'm just gonna start shooting it. And if you look at the damage coming off that guy, and he's freezing. Do you see how he froze? That's coming from a kinetic weapon. And that is because of that skill in the skill tree. So, very cool. And this is the red line. And I always set this thing on delayed charge. So I'm actually going to put stickies on these guys, and then I'm going to let them detonate. And that too, you see how it's applying cryo damage to the damage there as well. So, again, being able to do that, and that skill in our skill tree is, you may run infusion. And it basically makes any gun get your action skill element added to it, almost like an ASE. So after my action skill, I'm adding corrosive because my grenade has an ASE corrosive. So automatically, I'm going to have a handful of elements going all the time, making honestly using cryo becomes the worst option, right? You want to use some other element than cryo, since you're always going to have cryo.
And you didn't change anything to boss Trant. You're just using the same build for Trant, right?
Yeah, I'm just using the same build for Trant.
Sorry, people shoot me now. I gotta shoot things now. I got to pay attention.
Now, when bossing with a Ties the Bind build, you actually want to grasp things and you're not. Oh man, he's just being real nasty with me. Yeah, if you can find an enemy that's you can grab hold of. Oh, and by the way, part of the issue, this is a bad boss to show this on. Tron is completely immune to cryo.
Oh, okay.
So we're doing no cryo damage against him. You'll see that there's 0 cryo damage numbers coming up on just a bunch of resists. That's because he totally cryo resistant, making him a real challenge. His brother, on the other hand, is not, and his brother, General Trant, is a breeze. So that's the build. I'm going to go back into it real quick here, just review the skill tree. I'm not going to go through it again, but I'm just going to put it up for a second here. And let's see, there's a red skill tree. Important not to have conflicts in there if you're going to run the route. Green tree, 3 into personal space. And then here's what we did with the purple tree. Again, you can transfer points around in here as you see fit. Whatever you decide you want to do.
Transfer points between go with the flow and unweave?
Between, unweave and go with the flow. Okay. If you put 2 here and 1 here, or 3 here and 3 here, they're both equally good, and the situation we've created with this build, you're basically going to be in that state all the time, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And then, officially speaking, the intended build here from a gun standpoint, I'll put it back here real quick, is get that root in there. Beacon, DNA with consecutive hits, Juliet's Dazzle with splash damage, Complex Root with splash damage, Frozen Heart with action skill start, Phase Zerker, you don't want any conflicts on this. Whispering Ice Grenade with Corrosive ASE. You could do Shock ASE. You could do Incendiary ASE. Oh, this is another thing I did discover this week, though. Don't do Radiation. Don't do Radiation ASE. Because
I did notice earlier in one of the fights you did get a little close with something and got some radiation on you. It did seem to hurt you a little bit, so...
Yeah. Well, if you
Yeah.
have it if you have it on your ASC and you're getting close when those ice crystals explode and the enemies explode with them, the way radiation is, it spreads to people who are nearby. Well, we got a whole bunch of AoE and splash damage, and guess who it splashes back on? You.
Mm.
And you end up
The
irradiating
Vault Hunter, you
yourself and
say?
killing yourself. Yes. So don't do an ASC 50 radiation here. Any other element, fine. You don't need to do cryo because you're already getting it, but yeah, don't do radiation. And then finally, an Icebreaker Victory Rush with area of effect damage. Everything else on there, whatever, but one with area of effect damage would be important. And it doesn't have to be a Victory Rush. If you wanted more lifesteal, you could do a Icebreaker Auto Idol. Take your pick of what kind of artifact you want, but Icebreaker is the important part of this, and AoE on it. Other than that, it doesn't really matter. Any artifact is fine. Victory Rush gives you some minor buffs. Yeah. So that's the build as it sits, as it were, and it's a fun one, man. Like I said, I'm really excited, and it reminds me you got to get out of your menu, Killjoy.
But I want to express my joy in your build, so you can see me.
All right. I was trying to take us back to Sanctuary, where it's quiet.
The build that you put together, the Winter Witch build.
Oh, I like it. Yeah. You went all blue, huh?
Didn't show it. Hang on a sec. Here we go. Try that again. Blows my mind, my friend. Blows
Nice.
my mind.
Nice. I like it.
All right. I'm out of my menu. Take us back to Sanctuary. Let's talk about, I believe, we get to talk about the review of the beers now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll let you go first on the review, because, like I said, you've got something different. I've got COVID lockdown brew.
COVID lockdown beer. Almost sounds like you got some beer you found tucked in the corner of your basement someplace. Like, oh, I got this COVID beer. Oh man, it
Might be from last season. Might be from last year.
Exactly.
I don't know.
The lubricator was good. It's actually Doppelbock. I'm really starting to enjoy Doppelbocks, which are like I believe it stands for double lager or double something.
Yeah.
The Doppel portion of it.
Doppel is double. And Bach is actually a Bach is a beer that's
beer geek, come on.
Yeah. So technically what happens is when you lager a beer, it separates, right? And so Bach is actually a way of removing a certain segment of a large scale brew, and it's like the darkest part, right? So like
yes.
if you had it in like a clear tank, you would see that the top is very light in color and the bottom gets very dark in color, because lagers are bottom ferment, or not lager. Yeah, lagers are bottom fermenting. Ales are top fermenting. And anything that's down by the fermentation is a lot darker, and the grain settles down there. And so when you're making large-scale batches of beer, you end up with like 80% beer and 20% Bach, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
So
whatever they put ended up in the can here, it ended up in a good place. It is dark. It's very dark. It's not quite as obviously as dark as the dark lager I had last week, which was like oil. It is definitely deep brown. You can tell it's probably lager-ish, but no, it's very good, really good. I enjoy it. It's almost gone too, so there's that. What about yours? What did you think of your COVID lockdown beer?
It's good, man. Cold Snap's good. It's got a little spiciness to it. It's like oftentimes with wheat beers, I have to have a piece of fruit in them, like an orange or a lemon. But this one doesn't need anything. It's perfect the way it is. You can taste there's like some coriander and probably some orange peel and maybe some sort of, there's like a little spiciness, almost like maybe a nutmeg or a cinnamon spiciness to it. It's very good. And very light. Light on everything. It's not particularly heavy. Easy drinking. So
not the 8% ABV that I'm slamming tonight.
No, I think this is like 4.8 or something. So it's an easy one, and very good.
Nice, good.
And I think that's it, man. I'm Again, very excited about the build. It's a very fun build. Again, we ran the takedown with it, no problems. Just, I mean, really, actually, I think a more accurate statement would be we ripped through the takedown, Guardian takedown with it the other night. I mean, it tore things up. You were running Snow Goblin, that tears things up, and so it was.
The two of them together was
fast run, and it was very deadly. Yeah, very deadly.
It almost felt like cheating. It almost felt like cheating. That's how good they were. So they worked really well together. And yours definitely does work by itself too, as we just saw. So
right. Yeah, they're both very strong builds. So, but this one's fun. Nice. And in the theme of winter, it's fun to run around freezing things and making things turn into snowballs, snowmen, ice cubes, whatever. And so there's that.
Well, you know what that means now is as summer approaches, spring and summer approaches, you got to find some ones that start using some of the cryo stuff, or not cryo, excuse me, the incendiary. Yeah.
Well, I suppose I could trade it out for an on-action skill start Nova Burner.
There you go. Yeah, options.
We have options.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then there we go.
Awesome. All right. Well, that does it for me, and I'll let you sign us out then, Negan.
All right. Well, thanks for the build, Burt. It was a lot of fun. The Winter Witch, Amara build by Burt Reynolds. Discord, obviously, and Angelic Beastly and Beastly Creatures is on Discord. I tried to put the paste in chat, but it didn't get me the correct link, so that didn't end up in chat. So join us there if you want to. It's where also put our build videos as well, and we're on YouTube. And on that note, everybody else, see ya.